It is that time again, confirmed. Munich Ravens have all their imports. Now this one is definitely an interesting one to look at. Obviously Munich are considered to be a title contender this year. They were kind of a title contender last year too. They had an electric offense, but their defense kind of didn't really do too well, and they didn't ultimately make the playoffs. But for a first year franchise, they had an incredible season. This is the most shorthand I think I've ever put on my reports. So for those that are unaware, on my grading system, I have shorthand next to it that basically tells me a little bit more about the information of the player. For example, Darius St. Robinson is a 4 IXA. Now that doesn't necessarily mean he's a 4 as in starter, we'll get to that in a minute. But I meaning injury concerns, XA meaning experience advantage within the system or within his college football or professional football career. That brings me on to why I'm talking about it. Shorthand for me, I know how to write so many I's for injuries on my shorthand notes. Of course, we'll look into that and discuss that further. But this team does have some injury concerns in some places, and it's going to be interesting how it plays out. Tyler Voimorne is a Samoan name, so I apologize if I get it wrong. We're going to look at two Kiwis today, and Tyler is the first of which, and he is one of those players that I next to him. Played only 3 games last season as a rush, but the more I looked into him, the more I got excited about seeing him this season. So he got 2 sacks in those 3 games. His anticipation of the snap is the best I've seen in a while. He has unbelievable snap anticipation, and off the line he is off like a fucking jet. Like he made Toby Letman, he gave him some business in the games where they matched up. Like that, he was off the snap like crazy. He's very active hands. He's a very solid tackler, obviously, of course, coming from a rugby background. Dotted around a lot in college, which, you know, read into that however you will, but he has played college football in the States. Doesn't necessarily have the ankle bend. Like, he'll get really, really close, and sometimes running backs are just able to put him off course, and he can't correct his ankle. He has great knee bend, he has great leverage. It's just that last tiny part when it comes to getting across the running backs. Doesn't necessarily have the flexibility in his ankles, and I think that comes from his injury. I'm pretty sure he had an ankle injury, that's why he came out. So that's probably what that is, but doesn't necessarily grapple reset either. Like, he'll get his elbows pinned and he's done. if he gets hands, he could be active with his hands. But in terms of his elbows, if they do get pinned, then he's kind of out of the play. But the more I looked into Tyler, the more I liked him. And I'm kind of going on a bit of a limb here. Now, it's kind of a difficult thing because he's a rush, so he could be a role player, but he did do really, really well in his production levels when he was in, so he could be a starter. I think ultimately, because of the big injuries, and we didn't see much from him last season, he's going to be a role player. Absolutely, I think that he could be a starter. I think that he's an excellent player. Really excited to see him edge into starter. But I said the same thing about Bomback, that he was a rush, that he doesn't necessarily play every down, so he can be a starter as a defensive end. Kind of the same thing, but with added injuries and less experience at the ELF level. I'm kind of going on a little bit about him because I liked him that much off of the tape, and I am really, really excited to see Tyler play because I think he's going to be one of the players that I would put on like a sleeper list. I know the ELF Live just did their sleeper list. Tyler is one of my players on the sleeper list that you need to look at this season. Ichiwalu, again, apologies for the pronunciation. Samoan is an incredibly hard language. I've looked it up, I've scoured the internet how to pronounce it correctly, but if I do butcher it, then it's nothing personal to apologize. But Lou is so strong. Lou is incredibly strong. One of the strongest interior defensive linemen we probably have. Like, he can move people physically extremely well. It's the rawness that comes with that. Like, he doesn't have great pad level. His burst off the line isn't elite, but he affects the run game extremely well because of his ability to anchor, and that's usually an offensive lineman term, but he doesn't get sent back very easily, and he can tackle really, really well. His awareness as well of the gap schemes is good because he sees a running back, he will get like an arm on him, and he's so big that it's kind of hard to stop him. He was part of the IPP, he's only 23 years old, only played in a handful of games, so he didn't play in a bunch, he also got injured. Played in 7 games total. He's not a player that deals with the injuries, and he plays 7 games, which is another one of the players that has I next to their name in my shorthand system. Got 2 sacks, but I wouldn't necessarily say that he's a pass rusher. Yeah, he is a run-stopping defensive tackle, of course. Naturally comes to the position, but I do think that he is another one of the players that isn't necessarily getting as much talk. But his strength, man, is unreal. I think pound for pound, he might be one of the strongest players in the ELF. kind of hard for me to place him. Again, with the injuries, it's just such a big thing. But I think I'm going to also put him as a role player. Those two are both going to sit there. I wouldn't be surprised if they both move up. Tomowa Awewo is the running back we're going to look at before we look at Evans. One of my favourite players in the league. I've been very vocal how I think he is the best running back in the ELF. He's a receiving threat. Started off as a receiver in his early days. He's only been playing football for a little while, so maybe his ball handling isn't elite. They had 5 fumbles last season, about 1,100 yards on the ground, 14 touchdowns. So he's produced excellently. When he came into the league last season from the Algo Comets, I was super excited. I put all over Twitter that I thought he was going to be great, and he was. And I think that he's going to be great again this year. Robbed of an all-star last season, I think. I really don't see how he didn't get an all-star. Like last year, he was one of the best runners and also a very good receiver. So for me, it's an all-star. I think that if he doesn't get it again this year, then he's been snubbed 2 years. Again, I'm saying that without knowing if he's even going to be as good as he was this year. But I do think that Tommy was going to be upon the top of the rushing list, and probably most likely the top receiving running back. Him and Ali Khalifi, but I do think he's better than Ali. He's just more athletic. He's just so much burst. He's not an elite blocker if I'm being picky, but he is solid. And of course, the fumbling due to a rugby background, but he does have excellent skill set. And Tomowa, for me, all-star. Evans Yoruba is next on the list. Nominal defensive tackle, 2-time all-star. He's actually counting as the E, which I am surprised about due to him being Ghanaian, but I thought that I could have sworn that he was a homegrown before, but he is going to be an E player, which came as a shock to me and a few other people, but he doesn't separate double teams excellently. That's one of the very, very few things that he's not very good at. Dominant in strength, great off the snap, fast hands, incredibly fast hands, and one of probably the best defensive tackle off the line in Europe. And he's phenomenal. I'm a massive fan of him. He got 8 sacks last year as an interior defensive lineman, which is unreal. Like as a pass runner, that whole Hamburg defensive line was amazing, but he was the gem of that ground. And 3-time All-Star, I think, is the expectation for him. He's going to have more support with the 2 Kiwis, and I can't see him not getting another very spectacular season. He might even go over 10 sacks. To have an interior defensive lineman with 10 sacks would be phenomenal. He affects the run, he affects the pass. Evans is my favourite defensive tackle in Europe. Him and Jason, I think, are 1A and 1B. You can't go wrong. Another all-star player for Munich Ravens. Wael Nasri, one of the best linebackers in Europe, in many people's opinion. I do think that he's probably a top 5, top 4. Went to Berlin in 2021, spent a couple of seasons in Frankfurt. Now has moved to Munich Ravens. French inside linebacker, a little bit shorter than maybe some others. He's listed at 5'10", 231 pounds though. Like, he has size. He's a run effective linebacker. Some of his angles I think are a little bit questionable, and I do think that his motor is, I've got it written down as on and off motor, which I think translates it well. Because sometimes he's just going to stand there. And then other times he'll be very bursty. Like he has very on and off, and I would like to see that be a bit more consistent, if I'm being completely honest. But he does effective run really well. He has solid tackling when he does wrap up. Nasri is one of the most durable players in the league. Like, he played 10 games the first season, all 12 in the second and third. Like, he's played in 34 career games in the ELF. That's probably one of the most, if not the most. I'm not sure what ELF, and Peter's going to have to fact check me on that, of any player in the ELF. He is a starter level player. I think as one of the better inside linebackers. You know, he is a 2-time All-Star, which is a bit surprising. I think some people are going to put him as a starter. I just think the inside linebacker position this year has got a lot better, and I do think that he's going to have more competition. If he was an All-Star, I'm not going to be surprised. There's a lot more competition at the top of that position, you know, so again, I wouldn't be surprised if he's an All-Star. I'm just going to put him myself as a starter due to there being linebackers that also have a bit more effective in pass coverage. And that's why I would like to see him improve on this offseason. It's just opening up the fluidity in his hips, fixing the motor so it's not so on and off, and he could be instant All-Star player that I have been very vocal about. Was one of my favorite DBs in the league. Like, I've made a whole video about him. If you haven't seen that, go and watch that. So I'll keep this one brief. But Nidslander is ultra aggressive, comes down the screen super well. Downsides are his trigger isn't necessarily elite, and he turns his head towards the receiver and not necessarily quarterbacks, and missed out some big plays. Go and watch my video on him. I'll link it in the description. I'll put it here. You need to watch it. It's short. It won't take you very long, but I'll leave you to go and do that. I'm trying to think of players who I think are better than him as like young DBs in Europe. I don't think there are any. So it's high praise. I think that he starts, they've obviously seen something in him in Munich to bring him as an import, even though he is that young. He has a great frame, 6 foot, 190, looks athletic as fuck from the recent pictures that came out of him. I say recent, like it wasn't like a month ago. Got 2 interceptions last season, has spent 2 years at the Raiders in the ELF team, which a lot of people don't know that he was on the team in 2022. Just didn't necessarily get as much playtime. This year he broke out. Malik Jackson, shout out to him, the former DC over there who told me about him. And when I was with him in the Netherlands, said, you got to fucking watch this kid. You're not talking about him enough. And he was right. Another OG of the league, Darius St. Robinson, another player that had I next to his name. And it is only this year that he struggled with injuries. He played 12 for the Panthers in 2022. He played 10 for them in 2021. He is one of the best players in Europe. He was an all-star, but he also formerly went to Clemson, which people forget. He's bursty, he's quick, he's athletic, freak. Injuries. He played 1 game last season, had an immediate injury. I believe it was his Achilles, and he was out for the whole season. I'm a massive Darius St. Robinson fan. Anyone who knows me knows I am a massive Darius St. Robinson fan. I just need to see how he looks when he's coming off the injury. He's 32, and if it is an Achilles, some have said that is like a death sentence for athleticism. I don't think that's true, especially not in 2024. We see a lot of players come off of Achilles injuries and look fine. I think the most recent at the moment is Rodion Enrique. Also, actually, pretty much the fucking same situation. Week 1 gets injured. Achilles now looks excellent. So I think that we can see the same with Darius. Wouldn't be surprised if he's among the top safeties. But I just need to see how he looks at injuries. Yeah, that's a big thing. I'm going to put him like... He's more likely to get All-Star, I think, than Kristoff. I think he's more likely to get All-Star than Nazari. It's just injuries. 2021 man as well, like he's a big player. He had 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 2 blocked kicks in 2021. Like he was phenomenal in that year. And then 2022 was actually when he got his All-Star vote. Another player that has not yet played in Europe, Joshua Flowers. He ranges from 6'1" to 6'3". Pro day was 6'1", college says 6'3", so I'm gonna go with the pro day and say 6'1". But he does have length. His short shot wasn't phenomenal. I was watching some of his old tape from the BC Lions that he used to play at, and his trigger looks good. His movement skills are top notch, splendid movement skills, fluid man cover corner. I think that's what he is. Trigger is fine, but not. And there were some cases that looked really good, and some cases it didn't look so great. So I think that's probably just an inconsistency. But plays quite high, and I think sometimes his hands are misplaced. Which if he is going to be a man coverage specialist, I think that he needs to lock that up. But as a long, lengthy, rangy corner, I think that he certainly does have a place in this league. Of course, he played with the Lions in the CFL, so he clearly has the experience and the ability to do so. I'm going to put him here. Just because I've seen Darius in Europe, and some players don't make the jump to Europe as well. Plays at Winston-Salem State University before, which was a D2 school. John Cole, next up. John Cole is a difficult one. Of course, he's going to be compared to Markel Castle. He's going to be. It's natural. You have a Triple Crown winner that leaves, surprise in the offseason. They're going to bring in someone else, and they're always going to be naturally compared to Markel. Now, he is Arizona Christian's all-time leading receiver. He went over the GFL 2, got 1,000 yards and 15 touchdowns. Wasn't as dominant as a receiver as other receivers were in that league. But GFL 2 is a big difference between the ELF. Naturally, he's going to have better offensive line. He's going to have more time. He's going to have better quarterback. He's going to have better weapons around him. They're going to take up some of the attention of the American DBs. I think he's going to play in the slot more. He's listed at 5'10", 175 pounds. So he is on a slightly slighter side, and he's not like someone like Markel was fucking rocked up. He was huge. So it's very different receivers. So I don't think it's fair that it necessarily could be compared, but it's just how it is. He can extend plays. He does have sharp routes. His contact balance is very nice, and he does have ability to pull in the ball even through contact, which is going to be a big thing if he's going to be playing over the middle as a slot receiver. Release is kind of more slow developing, and I don't think that he has the most diverse route tree. I think that's the biggest thing on John at the moment. Do I have him graded as a top 10 receiver? No, I don't, but he could absolutely prove me wrong. We saw how good this offense was last season. I think it's probably going to be not as good because they lost John Shute, but I think it's going to be a very solid offense. It looks like they're going to go for more of a defensive identity when it comes to a new head coach, Kendall Edison. But John Cole, starter. Last but certainly not least, we knew this one was going to come. He was the person we expected all to re-sign. Chad Jeffries, extremely safe for the ball, and he threw 5 interceptions last season to 30 touchdowns. Has 69.85% completion rates, is extremely efficient passer. Chad is one of the best QBs in the league. It's not particularly close. He's 31. He's played all over Europe. He's a veteran of the game. 6'2", 220. Big dude. One of the best players in the season last year. Like, it was obvious that he was up there with the very best. It's him, Jadrian, Riley. That's my top 3 quarterbacks in Europe. Honestly, he might just be. So, that being said, got to be another all-star, right? Like, he was an all-star last season as a second teamer. Of course, when Jadrian breaks every record, it's kind of hard to get over that kind of, production. But he has an amazing offensive line now. Honestly, that offensive line might be one of the best. Here is the kicker. So we have Chad, we have Tomiwa, we have John Colt. That is the imports on offense. Very defensive-heavy season for the import class. Of course, they do have good Germans. Marvin Rush. We got 16 Dragon, I think, gets slept on. His offensive line is fucking phenomenal. He has Philip Okonwu, who's going to be a good tight end, and Lawrence Regler from the Galaxy. So he does have good German talent. Do I think they're going to be as good an offense as last season? I do not. Do I think it could be one of the best offenses still? Maybe top 5? Yeah, probably do. Very interesting how they built this team. It's fascinating, honestly, to go from one of the best offenses, like second best offense in the league, to just shift in identity. I know they got Kendall Edison, who's a DC at Hamburg for years. I think that obviously the big thing with these two, they could easily go up. A couple of these guys could easily go up. If they can sort out the injuries, they'll beat the playoffs. The Raiders are there for the taking. That conference is not great, and it's basically only the Surge that are going to stop them from getting it. That will do us here. Going to be a weird one, honestly. Until making this video, and honestly until the last few minutes, I didn't realize how defensive heavily they are. So let's just see how it goes. If you stayed this long, thank you very much. Support's been crazy. 25 subscribers away from the 1,000 mark. Can't thank you guys enough. So the support on these has been wild. So thank you very much. See you later. Goodbye.